We are now talking about peacemaking. What's civil war? With a question mark after it, is the title of this particular installment. You will know what this plot line is already if you watched some earlier videos. What we're doing now is piling reinforcing story on top of reinforcing story about how white supremacy reinvents itself after the Civil War as a new set of actions for the law of gravity. The reunion and peacemaking that you saw in Birth of a Nation are Northerners and Southerners clasping white hands together in a way to reaffirm the healing of the nation, while at the same time making that healing process happen over the abuse of black rights and black bodies. What civil war? We're all white brothers under the skin. You heard the same message again as melodrama. Remember, there's a difference between melodrama and docudrama. Griffith, docudrama, melodrama, Gone with the Wind. Of again, peace being made between warring North and South. And at the end, we all get on with our business of constructing the white city and ruling black people out of politics, the election of 1876, the retreat from Reconstruction. White people are showing up all over the place, but they're showing up enforcing the law simply by going about their daily business, as opposed to opposing the law. So now we are in a period of time between, say, about 1910 and 1912, 1913, and we're having literal peacekeeping and peacemaking being made by the people who were at war with each other. By the early part of the 20th century, segregation is everywhere in the South. Terror is everywhere in the South and spreading northward. Disenfranchisement is everywhere in the South and lots of problems otherwise. Birth of a Nation has made its global and national tour. And old Confederate and Union soldiers who are still alive in 1912 and 1913 plan a grand reunion ceremony where they all get together on the battlefield at Gettysburg, pitch their tents, pretend that they're in encampments like they had been back before the war, but their encampments are all right next to each other. And throughout a period of 3 days, everybody smokes and drinks and sings patriotic songs together. And Northern soldiers start singing Dixie. Beautiful programs of people clasping hands and patting each other on the back and trading beers with each other, with the idea that reconciliation is the mood of the new white nation. See how the film and the ritual go together? The second thing that is important to happen, that happens is, and this is really important to stress, during this exact same period of time, starting in 1890, you can actually pick the date when this happens. Mississippi puts together a new constitution that's emulated by every other southern state. What it does is repeal its constitution of 1868, which was all about being written by black people so that they could have the right to vote. The new constitution of 1890, it's called the Mississippi Plan because it's adopted by other states, completely segregates everything, including outlawing interracial marriage, and sets up separate prisons, sets up separate schools, sets up separate but equal. 1896 is the famous decision that's made of separate but equal that comes out of the Supreme Court from that year. You can see it all piling up on top of itself. This is when the Klan is really busy. This is when the white leagues are really active. This is when the Klan is spreading across the South. And black resistance, again, is something that happens by African American people insisting on their right to bear arms. The Mississippi Plan is basically a political document for a segregated white supremacist world. And it's adopted wholesale by a lot of other southern states in a way that neutralizes the 14th and 15th Amendments. While that's going on, these ladies that you see in this other image are convening at Arlington National Cemetery, the place where our military heroes are buried, right? Arlington National Cemetery, you might know this, you might not, it should surprise you, is the former Robert E. Lee plantation, and a very vengeful white North and African-American North and African-American South thought that the idea of turning Robert E. Lee's plantation into a giant memorial and graveyard for patriotic Americans who give the last gasp for their country was a really cool thing to do. These ladies that you see here are developing a memorial in Arlington National Cemetery to pay homage to people that a generation earlier were considered traitors to the United States because they tried to destroy the United States by leaving the Union. That's how Frederick Douglass saw them. That's certainly how Ida B. Wells saw them. That's certainly how any old abolitionist would think of them. And that's the way that Black Lives Matter people and folks that support them feel today about Confederate statues. Tear them down. These are the people putting them up. And they're not putting them up in order to be able, right after the war, to say, oh, we really mourn our dead. They're doing it in 1890 in order to reinforce the Mississippi Constitution of that year that declares white supremacy of all kinds in all places. So the idea that these statues are somehow memorializations of valorous Confederates right after the war is wrong. The statues that are being torn down today all over the United States were populating this part of the world and all over the United States at the turn of the century, when the white city was going, when we had our empire, when we've done Birth of a Nation, and now we're turning Confederates into American heroes. All in the idea of creating a more perfect union. Blue and gray veterans have a beer together. Wealthy Confederates put up all those statues in Richmond on Monument Avenue that have just been torn down. The origins of everything that you're seeing with the statues controversy today begins with that kind of photograph. So what we're living in is a huge replay of the law of gravity that was first decreed and reinforced by all these different things. Contested elections, railroad strikes, Indian wars, birth of a nation, Confederate reunions. What Civil War? We're all brothers under the skin. That's what they said. And the skin part's really important. You're seeing, I hope, how various sections of earlier videos are coming together to echo and re-echo as we move along into a new cultural territory that brings all this other stuff along with it. So when we're looking at the statues controversy today, we're not seeing the wrong thing. We're not believing the Confederate claim that this is a testimony to a valiant way of life that ennobled my ancestors and doesn't have a thing to do with slavery or racism. It's simply about Southern honor. No. Many people have discovered these truths already, and for much of what I've just been saying, this has now become common knowledge. The more common it becomes, and the more it's clear that when you say Black Lives Matter, you're repealing the law of gravity right then, is terribly important. But let me editorialize just at the end here. It's easy to put a Black Lives Matter sign out in front of your house. Tells your neighbors that you're doing just fine. It's easy to feel one way or another that you've done a lot of virtue signaling by putting that sign out there. Let me suggest to you that it might be different if you put it on a t-shirt and walked into any major department store. See what kind of reactions you get. What happens when you take the other turn out the front door? Instead of just telling your neighbors who already agree with you, Black Lives Matter, all you've done is bought a sign and reinforced what everybody knew about you in the first place. The idea of standing up means, instead of having a Budweiser sign on the front of your shirt or something like that, have something that says something about where you stand with regard to Black Lives Matter. Risks? Sure. Rewards? Yep.